Hi, I'm Kubeir. Today we're going to talk about reference letters. But before we get into that, let me sort of just address a bit of a legal mumbo jumbo here. Anything that I will say is not legal advice. So please do your due diligence, and before you listen to any of this, before you go as per what I'm saying, please check all CIC websites, please check all legal law books before you apply them, because I do not take responsibility for what I say. However, whatever I'm saying, I will give you credible sources for them. I will give you the information from where all this is generating, and you can always go back and check. I'm not a consultant, I'm not a lawyer, but I am attached to some legal legal consultants, and from whatever I say, I'm not charging you anything. So as far as the law is concerned, we're pretty much taken care of. Now, reference letters. Let's take it from the top. What exactly is reference letters, and where on the law book does it talk about it? What does it mean? Why do you need them? What is the purpose of getting a reference letter? What should be in a reference letter? What is CIC looking for in a reference letter? If you don't draft it well, what happens? What are the repercussions? If you get it wrong, what happens? And once you give it to CIC, what do they do to check if what you have said is all true, is all genuine? All this we're going to cover in today's broadcast, and hopefully you'll get to prepare yours better and use this information to file your application successfully. I'm going to refer to the law first. So IRPA, which is Immigration Refugee Protection Act, Section 10.3, subsection A. This is where it talks about ministerial instructions as to minister has the authority to issue instructions in reference to applications pertaining to permanent residency to Canada. It includes express entry, it includes invitation to apply, it includes expression of interest. So all this is mentioned in IRPA section 10, and in 10.3 it talks about ministerial instructions. Now when you go to the ministerial instructions, which is I think the last it was updated on the June of 26th 2018. Under that, if you go to section 25, 25.1, 25.2, that is where the crux of what reference letters is all about is all laid down very, very clearly. And I'm going to pull this up on my screen right now, and so this is what it says. Section 25.1, it says, for the purpose of sections 23 and 24, foreign work experience is work experience that is acquired by a foreign national outside Canada in one or more occupations listed in skill type O, A or B. So basically it's one or more occupations. So people who ask about multiple knock, here you are. The ministerial instructions very clearly says that you can acquire your work experience in more than one occupations. So that clears that bit, right? Now, part B, it says consists of full-time work experience or full-time equivalent for part-time experience with one or more employers. Again, that clarifies multiple jobs, multiple occupations, multiple employments. That this is acquired within the 10-year period preceding the day on which points are assigned to the foreign national, which basically means your last 10 years of work experience is what they're looking for, or your eligible work experience should be within the last 10 years. And the last one it says is remunerated by the payment of wages or a commission. So even if you do not get fixed wages but you get commission, you pretty much qualify under this. This is what is work experience. Now, what are the requirements? This is what is mentioned under section 25.2. Now, it says, in order to be assigned points under section 23 or 24 for their foreign work experience, a foreign national must specify in their expression of interest the 4-digit code in the national occupation classification that corresponds to each of the occupation they have engaged in while accumulating their foreign experience. So basically you got to choose your valid knock, which is skill O, A and B. Second part says, which is what pertains to today's chat all about, is it must have performed, or rather the person must have performed the actions described in the lead statement. Please, the key word here is must have performed the actions described in the lead statement for the occupation as set out in the occupational descriptions, and also as well as a substantial number of main duties, including all the essential duties as set out in the National Occupational Classifications. Whew. So that is the legal mumbo jumbo as far as the whole requirement of a work experience reference letter goes. Now, what is a work reference letter, or what is an employment reference letter? A lot of people confuse it with an experience certificate. You know, for a lot of you who probably will be watching this later, or who are watching it now, from the Asian countries, reference letter, the word reference is misinterpreted or misunderstood as somebody giving a character reference, or somebody giving a good conduct reference, somebody giving a good performance reference. So it is usually attached, that word reference is attached to those particular aspects. In the terms of CIC, it has no such relevance. In terms of CIC, an employment reference letter or a work reference letter basically talks about your work experience in details, and that's what they want. So if we actually jump back to a CIC website where it talks specifically about reference letters or proof of work experience, it very clearly says that they want you to mention certain details on a work reference letter. So what are these details? So first of all, it says is that it has to be an official document. The official document here would mean obviously company letterhead. So you have your company letterhead, company logo, company contact details, email address, etc., as a regular letterhead from a company would be. Obviously, whoever will sign this letter on behalf of your company would be an authorized signatory. So the name would be there, and the title would be there. Ideally, the person's contact details would also be there. Because this letter is going to talk about you, so obviously your name should be mentioned on the letter. This letter should be dated. So if this letter was made today, obviously today's date should go on in there. So date is extremely important because that sort of puts a period relevance of this letter. Also important, obviously, is your title. Whatever is your current title, whether you are a director, whether you're an executive, whether you're an assistant, whether you are a bookkeeper, whether you're an accountant, you're an engineer, whatever your title is, please mention, or rather have it mentioned on the letter. All the different positions that you must have done with this particular company. So for example, you joined this company 10 years back, you joined in as a management trainee, you climbed the ladder, after 2 years you got promoted, you became a manager or assistant manager, 3 years later you became a manager, and you progressively climbed the career ladder. So your letter, either you get them separately done for each different designation or each different title or each different work period, or you can get one made if it was the same company, but they should separately mention each different position that you have worked in. It should mention your current status. So basically, are you still working with them, or you've already left? Is this letter being made for your past employment? Is this letter being made from your current employer? So current status obviously needs to be mentioned. The work period, extremely important. Why is it important? Is because this is how you get your points. So work period is important. So it basically specifically says that you are working with this employer for the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or whatever is applicable to you. Number of hours per week. Number of hours per week is important because that is how CIC can judge whether your work experience is full-time work experience or a part-time work experience, and give you equivalent points for it, whether it is under eligibility points or under CRS. And obviously, the letter needs to mention your annual salary. Even if it mentions in monthly salary, it is absolutely fine, not a problem. CIC wants it as annual salary. We will talk about the alternatives of what are available if it is not as per this. And your letter should also mention benefits. So this in its entirety is what your reference letter is, because your reference letter also has to mention your roles and responsibilities. I mean, that is what we are talking about. That's what this whole thing is about, right? So your letter has to list down all the different jobs, duties, roles, responsibilities that you have performed in that company during that period for that particular function. This letter is all about that. Benefits is something like, were you given accommodation allowance, were you provided accommodation, were you provided performance benefits, were you given some sort of travel allowance, were you given extra holidays, were you given paid leave. All these are termed as benefits, so all those need to be mentioned. That's as per CIC. This in its entirety makes it a perfect reference letter. At least that's what CIC wants in a reference letter. But hey, we don't live in an ideal world, do we? I mean, we don't live in a perfect world. We live in the world where everything is not a straight line. It's all crooked. It's all areas where people do not really comply to our humble requests. And so what happens? So before we get into what happens if you cannot get this letter, let's talk about some other areas of what letters do and do not do. The letter must include lead statement, or rather, as per the ministerial instructions that we were just talking about. And you see, a lot of people get it wrong, and therefore it's very important you get this right. A reference letter is needed to check your claim for work experience. So and you're all aware, and I'm sure you're all pretty well informed about the whole process by now. So work experience basically gives you points from ranging from 9 points to 15 points for 1 year to 6 years of work experience for your eligibility points. Okay. Work experience gives you maximum points for your CRS score for a period of 3 years. Okay. So these are the two factors. 6 years and 3 years are the max points that you can get for your work experience. Whenever you are claiming for work experience, you see, now when you make your express entry profile, you basically go through a certain questionnaire which asks you what kind of work experience you have, how many years of work experience you have, and then you fill out your profile and you mentioned you have 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, etc., etc. Please bear this in mind that the system is considering you eligible or calculating your eligibility points based on the answers you give, based on what you mentioned under express entry profile. So before you change anything in your profile, be aware that you were allotted points for maximum of 6 years if you have mentioned 6 years in your express entry profile. So if you now decide to choose to reduce that a bit, make sure you first calculate your eligibility points and see if there is any difference because of the reduced number of work years or work experience years. Very, very important point. Secondly is if you're eligible, even with the reduced number of working years of your experience, your CRS maxes out at 3 years. So that's where it all adds up. Now, what does CIC look for when they get your reference letter? What are they exactly checking for? What are they trying to prove by your reference letter? So the first and foremost is obviously they want to make sure it's an official letter, it's come from your company, so all this is looking genuine. Okay, so so-and-so person has given me this reference letter. It's pretty genuine looking. It's from a valid looking company. The person's name is here, the person's work period is here. Now, as CIC, what am I looking for? First thing I'm looking for is a NOC. Now, National Occupational Classification, the NOC that you have chosen, which has to be under category O, A, or B. They need to validate this NOC to basically know that you really did perform these job that you're claiming that you did. And how will they basically get the idea of your NOC? It all boils down to your job roles and responsibilities. Because the ministerial instructions very clearly says that your document or your evidence that you're providing must list down activities performed in your lead statement. So if all of you, whenever you have time, go back to your computers, check your NOC. The first area after your NOC starts listing your, or rather mentioning your details, it will give you a paragraph where certain activities are mentioned as you having been performing them in order to be considered eligible under that particular NOC. So now, one of the most common ones, if you were to actually go and look, it says plan, control, evaluate, develop, implement. These are the activities that will be mentioned in the lead statement. So your reference letter necessarily needs to use these keywords when describing different roles and responsibilities. Please bear that in mind when you're drafting your letters. Next one is that for example, if 10 different roles and responsibilities are mentioned on the knock database, make sure your letter matches substantial number. When substantial, now substantial is very subjective, you know. I could say substantial means 50%, somebody could say substantial means 60 or 70%, CIC could say substantial means 90%. So it's a very gray area how to define substantial, but to be on the safe side, 70%, 60% is something what you're really aiming for, that your knock database duties that are listed there and your reference letter, there should be a match of at least 60 to 70%. It's extremely important. Please bear that in mind. And if at all the knock lists any essential duties, which basically says that this person must have performed these duties, those definitely have to be mentioned in a letter, because hey, it's essential, right? So this is what CIC is looking for as far as the knock is concerned. Now, if you go back to what we were talking about, ministerial instructions again, it also says that your job or your employment must be paid. You should have been paid wages or commissions or some sort of a remuneration. So your letter must talk about your salary. It must talk that you were paid an X amount of salary for this period of time that you worked upon. And hence, you know, you need to sort of, through that letter, give the proof that it is a paid employment. Because any charitable or honorary positions that you hold, any training or internships or any apprenticeships where you are not paid, those cannot be considered as valid proof of, or cannot be considered as valid work experience to claim points. And the third and the most important bit is work experience period. Or so basically, if you say you worked for 3 years, but it mentions you worked only 20 hours per week, then that does not make you eligible to qualify points for 3 years. Okay, that's the reason why CIC wants to know the number of hours you worked per week, so that they can understand whether it was full-time employment or part-time employment, and accordingly allocate you points based on that. So this is the CIC's perspective of what they want from work experience, what they want from your letter, and this is how you go about getting it. You see, there is no format for it. A lot of people keep asking, can I get a format for this letter? My knock code is 1111. Can I get a format? There is no specific format, okay? CIC just wants these details. You can mention it in any way you want it. You can make it look, you can add flowers, you can add monkeys, you can add animals, you can add fishes to your reference letters. It doesn't matter. You can address it to CIC, you can address it to Canadian High Commission, you can address it to Canadian government, you can address it to whomsoever it may concern. It doesn't matter. What matters is the content of the letter and whether it is valid as per what the requirement is. So don't worry about the format. Use your own format, okay? That's another problem. If you keep copy pasting somebody else's format, very soon CIC will have similar looking letters coming from thousands of people, and they'll start wondering if these letters are genuine, because you know everybody seems to be sort of machine printing it from somewhere, and it sort of raises an alarm. So please do not look at fixed formats. Use your imagination. This is your time to make sure you prove a point. Don't look for fixed formats. There is no such thing as a format as far as these letters are concerned. Let's go with, now the next one was age. Now, what is the age of the letter? Do these letters expire? If it was a previous employment, does it have to be current dated letter? All these things. So there is no age, okay? Employment reference letters does not expire by its date. So if it is a previous employment that you have worked with some employer, anything which is dated after or towards the end of that period is quite fine. Because if, for example, you date a letter for today and you continue to work in this company for another 1 year, then that period later on after today's date cannot be considered as valid, because it does not, your letter does not mention about that period. Okay, so if you are getting a letter, if you get a recent one, basically it will talk about your past total work experience and you can add that. And if it is from an employment which you earlier worked in, then the letter dated after that employment was completed, that's perfectly fine. And as I said, these dates do not expire. Okay, what else do we have here? We will cover verification, about how these letters are verified in a bit. What I wanted to cover more importantly was what happens to poorly drafted letters. Okay, if a letter does not include all the details that CIC wants, it will trigger two things. It will either trigger an additional document request, so you will be asked to provide more documents. You will ask to validate whatever areas were missing. That's the good thing, because at least you'll be giving a chance to prove it. Second one, which is considered slightly more serious, is that you will get a procedure. I'm sorry about that. You will get something called PFL, which is Procedural Fairness Letter, whereby CIC has almost decided that they're not happy with your application. They've almost decided that the evidence that you have given in terms of your work experience documents are not sufficient, and they're just giving you this last one chance to be fair to you, because procedurally they need to be fair and give you an opportunity, give you a chance to sort of prove your case. So you get one last chance to sort of substantiate your work experience. But you see, what all this will do is it will add process times to your application. Because first thing is, an analyst or an assistant will review the documents and he will not find it satisfactory. He will park the case and wait or queue it up for the officer's review. Once the officer will review, he or she will not find it satisfactory, and then they will raise a ADR, or they will basically park it for further review to address it as a PFL. All this will keep adding time in processing of your application. So avoid any badly drafted documents, avoid documents that do not contain all the details as required by CIC. Be very careful. You see, whenever you're in doubt, always refer back to CIC website. It does contain everything. Just make sure you have provided all the details that they're asking for, and if you have, you're pretty much on the clear. Okay, so that's as far as the letter and what a good letter is and what a bad letter is. Now, is that all that you need to do in order to provide work experience proof? Well, no. Though CIC doesn't ask for anything else, this is the minimal requirement that you need to provide. Okay. I would strongly suggest that yes, you can only give this letter, and as far as CIC concerned, as far as CIC's requirements are concerned, that's fine. But this doesn't suffice in most cases. I would suggest you add supporting documents, and as there is no such thing as less documents, the more you provide, the better it is. It just makes your case very credible. It just gives more strength and more integrity to your whole application. So provide offer letters. When you join your company, you must have got an offer letter, a letter of appointment. Add that. Contract, if you sign a contract with your company. Appraisals, performance reviews. Promotion letters at time of promotions. If you there was an achievement award, add that. If there was a compensation review and you were issued a letter to congratulate you on your compensation review, attach that. Very, very important, please attach salary slips, pay stubs, if you have them, if you had them, and you do not need to provide for the entire 3 years, 4 years, 6 years. I would suggest 12 random ones, put a couple of them for the first year, few of them for the next year, few of them for the following year, and so on and so forth. So random pay slips covering the entire work period, the recent ones, last 3 recent ones added to it. So that sort of makes a complete work experience package. As we said, not an ideal world and a crooked world. And so what happens when your employer refuses to give you a letter, or what happens when you're too scared to ask them for a reference letter because you're worried that they might fire you, or they might question whether you will continue working with them, or let's say you have a very, very horrible boss, who doesn't want to give you a letter, or if it's a company where you have left and you don't really know anybody and they're unwilling to give you, or if it's a company which is closed down, a very important question a lot of people have asked: what happens if a company has closed down? Now, in all these cases, if you just raise your hands and say, I do not have any documents to provide, it doesn't help. There have been a lot of cases, a lot of times people have addressed it with CIC that, it's a challenge sometimes to get a reference letter. but unfortunately this is a requirement, and it's a mandatory requirement. It's a requirement which calculates your very, very valuable points, and without this it won't cut it. So what are the alternatives? One of the alternatives which has worked for few people is that if you can get a refusal letter from your employer, which basically that a lot of these big tech companies do not provide reference letters. They have their own format of reference letter, which basically doesn't include anything that you want. It just says so and so is an employee, that's his salary, he's working from so and so period to so and so period, that's it. Yeah, it won't cut it. It doesn't help. So for such employers, if you can get a copy of an email, or if you can get them to write an email saying we will not issue you a reference letter, or we do not mention salary in our reference letter, or we do not mention details of your job in the reference letter, this will work in your favor, because you can use this as an evidence that your company refused to provide you this letter. And along with this, then you give added supporting documents to prove the areas that have been missing in this particular letter that you did provide or you could not provide. Section 11.2, A 11.2 is the stage where your documents are assessed. Your documents are assessed for the points based on which you received your ITA. Your application and your documents are assessed based on the fact of are you actually eligible to get the CRS score that you should have, or that you've got, and you've managed to get your ITA. So under this stage, CIC is going to calculate everything manually. Okay, and in order to calculate all this manually, they will need to know your NOC, your work experience period, as we've already discussed. So all these details are needed, and if your letter is missing, or if you cannot provide that letter, or the details in the letter are missing, provide supporting additional document. The onus is on you. You are the applicant. You are the one who is applying to the Canadian government saying, please, I need to become I would like to become a permanent resident in your country. Please, these are my documents. Assess them and grant me the residency. So the onus is on you to provide all the documents that they're asking for. The onus is on you to provide the genuine, credible documents that they're looking for. So the first one basically is that you get a refusal letter, you get a email from your company saying that we cannot give it to you, and you add all those documents. Not the best option, but it will work if you do not have any other option. The next best workaround, or rather not the only, but something which really works very well, is getting a letter written from your colleague, from your supervisor, from your manager, on a personal level. So you go back to your manager and say, listen, hey dude, I'm going to do this. I'm filing my application for Canadian PR. Help me out on this one. I'm not trying to lie. I'm not asking you to lie. If you could just write this down for me, because this is what I've been doing all these years, please, it will really help me. So get that done and have it notarized. So your colleague, your manager, your supervisor would write down basically the same reference letter, and in his individual capacity, and he can actually say that, and that's not a problem. Get this letter notarized. You see, what is notarization? I know in some of our Asian countries, notary is not given that much of weight, but in Canada, it's considered pretty heavy in terms of credibility, because the person is considered to be swearing under oath that whatever he's mentioning on the document is true and best known to him, and hence it is considered acceptable or credible proof of whatever you're saying is true. So get that document notarized now, and that will be, and along with the document, add the refusal mail, add your other supporting documents as we discussed earlier, as in your offer, appointment, contract, etc., 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 and collectively this becomes your work experience package. A lot of people ask, do I need to provide IT returns? You see, you don't need to provide IT returns. It's not a mandatory document. The reason why sometimes you are asked for IT returns or proof of compensation or proof or salary reimbursement, or rather salary reimbursement, is because CIC was not able to establish whether it was a paid employment or not. So, and hence they ask you for IT returns. A lot of people get paid in cash, and they do not know how to provide that. So what happens if you get paid in cash? What happens if you do not have IT returns, or you never filed for taxes? CIC is not interested if you are a good taxpayer. they'll CRA is here in Canada to take care of that. All they are interested in is to make sure that your employment was paid. So provide proof that this employment was paid. That's all they want. If you do not have IT returns, that's absolutely fine. Pay stubs, pay slips, if the salary came by check to your account, bank statements which highlight the salary credit, provide a salary certificate which basically states that your payment was in cash. If you have cash vouchers, provide that as well. All this will collectively prove your reimbursement or the fact that your salary was paid. And IT returns, if you have them, brilliant. That's a very credible source of proving that your employment was paid. So all this will add credibility to your documents. Now, have I missed something here? Okay. No, I got this. Yes. So what happens when you cannot find anybody from a company that you used to work for? That company is closed down. There is nobody there anymore. You can't contact anybody. What would you do then? Tough one. Honestly, you can't do anything then, except for the fact that you take a chance. You still provide as much documentation you have available, but keep in mind that the onus is on you. It's your responsibility to prove all the areas that I just explained that CIC is looking for, which is primarily NOC, work period, payment, working hours. If you have enough documentation that can prove, you might get lucky. Okay, but if you're not able to do that, then unfortunately there is no other way out. You are saying you used to work in that company, you say that you had all this, but how does anybody know whether that is true? So that's the reason you need it. Now, there are other cases where you've worked in a company, you've left the company, you had good managers, but those managers have now also left the company, and now there is nobody there in the previous company who can write you a letter because they don't know you. What do you do in that case? Now, in that case, also you can go back to your old colleagues who may not be working in that company anymore. They can write you this letter. That's not a problem. But get an added affidavit from them, an extra affidavit or an extra notarized document, which basically states separately, or actually you can make it part of the main reference letter as well, which they will write you, which basically states from their side that they were working for the same company that you are working, or you were working from X period to X period, or X period to Y period, and you were also working with them, and they basically attest to the fact that you guys were colleagues, and you did actually provide the kind of services to the company or on behalf of the company as is being stated in the reference letter, and this person has left that company, has moved on, and he or she will just provide their contact details, basically contact details in case CIC wants to call them. In case you cannot get a document notarized, it's absolutely fine. Get it attested by a lawyer. Different countries have different laws and regulations around notarization. So notarization is pretty common back in most of the Asian countries from a notary public. But if you're not able to do it because you might be in a different country or wherever that's possible, you can go back to an embassy. You can go back to your embassy, have them attest the documents. You can go to a lawyer and have him or her attest your documents, because these guys are also authorized. And in some countries there are also commissioner of oath. So you can go to the court and have them attest the documents. So you see, there are ways around it. All you're trying to do is provide credible documents in order to support your application. So this is collectively what will make a reference letter. So I've given you the option where company gives it to you, brilliant. If the company doesn't give it to you, you have an option. If the company is closed down, you know what to do. So this is collectively what work experience package or a reference letter would look like. Give me a moment. Just want to grab a sip of water, if you don't mind. Now, I think we've covered most of this. Yes. Extremely important, verification. How does CIC verify your work experience? I've been asked this question numerous times. I've answered this numerous times, but it continues to sort of boggle a lot of people. verification or assessment of your documentation happens, as I said earlier, under section A11.2. So when your application has crossed the R10, which is the completeness stage, it will then move on to the assessment stage. Usually assessment will be done at the local visa office. Now your local visa office could be probably the one in your country or near your country, wherever you geographically reside, or it could well be CPC Ottawa, or any other. I mean, it all depends on the workload. The first priority, I think, is given to the fact that it is geographically located wherever you are residing. Then if the burden has to be shared, then to the other overflowing corresponding visa offices. And then CPC Ottawa obviously takes a lot of applications for processing as well. At the local visa office, it is expected that the visa officers are aware of the local culture, local norms, local processes, procedures that are involved in the work environment. They're aware of the labor laws which are applicable to that particular country. They are aware of the different formalities that go around it. So for example, if you're working in the Middle East, you have certain criteria. I mean, you cannot have a work permit from a certain country, a certain company, and be working for somebody else. So your copy of your work permit also becomes a very valuable addition in your experience documents. Similarly, if you're in India or in Pakistan or in Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, you have certain work cultures surrounding your work experience. So the local visa officers are expected to know this, and that's the reason why they're able to assess this better. The first step that is taken in verification of documents basically is an online search. Okay, if it's a credible looking document that they have in front of them, and trust me, these guys are trained, and they see thousands and thousands of documents in their occupation, in the profession, all the time. Their eyes become accustomed to see a document and know that yes, this is a credible looking document, or no, there is something fishy in this, or I sense there's something not right with this. So trust me, they do have a separate section and a department called integrity integrity section, if you want to call it. And these guys are trained to identify fraudulent documents. So do not resort to any of that. I know few people have got away with it, and there will always be few people who will get away with it. If you are not one of those few people who get away with it, you're gonna get a ban for 5 years for misrepresentation. That will forever stay on your record. Whenever you apply for a visa to any other country, this will come up, and it's going to be an issue. So please stay away from those practices. That's the reason the verification has over a period of time become very strict. Recently also I posted another post on my group whereby people have been on social media asking to buy work experience documents, or have been requesting people to help them generate fake documents. What are you guys thinking? I mean, please, don't resort to those practices. The chances are you will get caught out, and if you do get caught out, it's an ugly picture basically. So don't do that. So let's go back to the verification process. The first one is an online check. If the document looks fine, if everything is mentioned on the document, they will usually do a web search. Okay, they will probably check the website of that company. They will check if the details of the companies match, the logo match, the address on the letterhead matches, or if it's an international group of companies, then basically they'll go through few details. And in some cases, they do have an access to certain information within the companies, or they can pick up the phone and call certain people and say, okay, can you run this name on your HR database and see this person exists, etc., etc. So that's the first part of the online search. If they find everything is fine there, that's just about it. They won't go any further than that. They've got your documents. They see everything is there. Everything is mentioned perfectly. The company checks out on the web. They're happy. And on they go on to the next stage. That's all that will happen to your application. They will also at times check your social media accounts. Now, when I'm saying social media, one of the main ones that is usually checked is the LinkedIn profile. So if you do have a LinkedIn profile, please make sure it's in consistency, or rather it's consistent to your work experience profile on the CIC application, or on the PR application. They may at times also check the social media account of the person who signed your document, or your colleague who then signs your document, to see if it all matches, you know. So if your employer didn't issue you a reference letter, if you got it done through a colleague or a manager, they might check his or her LinkedIn account to see if it all matches the period of work experience that you guys actually worked together in the same company during the same period. So just make sure that all your online professional accounts tally. Some guys have got caught out on that as well, and recently I've seen a procedural fairness whereby CIC did question that your LinkedIn account shows this and this. It has no connection to the same period where you actually said you were working for this and this. Please explain what's going on here. Okay, so stay away from, you know, those kind of issues. So what happens if they're not happy with what they're seeing online? Then the next process, or rather the next step in the process, will come on to the phone calls. In a lot of cases where they're not happy with what they see online, the next step is making a phone call. It could be to your manager, it could be to your supervisor, it could be to the switchboard of your company, and they will ask basic questions. If you're there, if you're not there, how long you've been working, what is the current project, how many people you handle, how many people in the company. They could also pick up the phone and call you immediately after that and cross-verify what they have just asked somebody in your company. Again, if it's all genuine, you have nothing to worry about, because, you know, it'll all check out. This is a problem where people try to create those fake documents, and that's where they get caught out. These are the areas where they get caught out. I'm not trying to tell you how to cover up your tracks if you're trying to make fake documents, but, you know, usually people get caught out on these things, so stay away from those things. Another good practice is to take a snapshot or take a picture of your reference letter and WhatsApp it or email it to your manager, and let him know once your application is in process that, listen, dude, my application is in process. You may get a call for verification. I am just sending you a copy of the reference letter. Keep it handy in case you get called, you know, very quickly, you know, what you have written, so you can verify the same thing, and you know, everything goes smoothly. Most of the guys are pretty cool, you know, they'll do it for you. That's not an issue. Now, in case they do not get satisfactory answer, at times they will call back again. They will call back probably a different person within the company. So let's say last time they spoke to your supervisor. Next time when they call, they'll probably call the HR department. They will call a more senior person, even the owner of the company if it's a smaller company, and they will try to cross-verify with him or her about you. Okay, so the verification doesn't just stop at the first step. You know, this is when there are red flags. This is when they're not happy about something in your letter. So that is a possibility. The third one which will happen is probably you will get an additional document request. You know, they have checked on few things. They're not happy with certain areas. They want you to specify, or they want you to give additional documents to prove certain aspects of your application. That's when ADR will happen. That's a good chance, that's a good opportunity for you to sort of rectify certain areas or provide additional documents and support your application. The good thing is at least they didn't reject it. You know, you have a chance to sort of get something going there. Another serious one which happens after all this is site visits. Now, the reason why those are serious is because things in your application have required now CIC to make a physical site visit. Means your documentation wasn't enough, the phone call verification wasn't enough, the additional documents that you provided were not enough. They need to physically make sure something about your application. Okay, so expect them to visit your office. Expect them to make check with your receptionist if you have one, office boys if you have one, lift man if there's a lift and there's a man operating the lift, the neighboring offices, the neighboring shops, owners, building maintenance, you name it. Okay, they can just walk into your office at any time. So it's not, you know, so for example, if you're working an evening shift, night shift, don't be surprised if they walk in at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the evening. You know, it's happened to a lot of people. They will identify themselves. They will basically obviously tell you or your supervisor or your manager who they are, and they will want to physically check whether you actually work there, whether you have been performing the kind of roles and responsibilities that you have stated. But trust me, if it has come to the site verification, things are already pretty serious. So, for your sake, I hope they find the right information that they were looking for, or they are able to be satisfied. Even after all this, if they're not happy, if they're not satisfied with what they have seen, then comes the final stage, whether either you'll get a PFL, which is Procedural Fairness Letter, or you will get called for an interview. Now, if you get called for an interview, please don't freak out. I know very recently a couple of you guys have come to me and asked me, what do you do? Don't freak out, first of all. It's all right. If you're getting called for an interview, means you still have a good opportunity to explain your case. It's not a rejection, it's not a refusal, okay? Please carry all your documents, all your original documents. Prepare yourself well, know your documents well. Get a couple of additional affidavits, notarized documents, letters from your company. Carry as much evidence with you to the embassy, and be prepared to show them whatever they need in original in front of them, and answer all the questions that they want. So it's not an issue. PFL, again, you have an opportunity to basically still answer one last time any of their concerns. Do not ignore it, and you basically will sail through. All right, so this is basically how the work experience gets assessed. This is how the work experience gets checked, how it gets verified. This is what you do if you do not have proper documents. This is what you do if you have a regular document. This is how a reference letter is drafted. This is how it is done. All of this we have covered in the last 45 minutes. I think I did well in the timing there. Right. So that's all for today's session, folks. Thank you for joining in. A lot of people are here right now watching live, and I'm sure I'll be posting this link on all of our groups and forums. I'm traveling tomorrow, so wish me luck, please. To India and then onwards to Nepal, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Tanzania. We are conducting several seminars in various countries. The agenda for our seminars is not commercial. A lot of people have asked, if there's a commercial. No, there is no commercial agenda. I'm not there trying to say, hire me, promote my company, etc., etc., etc. Not looking to do that. Please attend our seminars. The reason for that is because I'm going to take you step by step as to how you can do these applications yourself. I'm going to tell you how you can avoid getting rejected. I'm going to tell you what are the common pitfalls you can avoid falling into while doing your application. And I'm going to tell you how easy it is to do it yourself without any consultant, without spending thousands and thousands of dollars on people out there who are there to scam you. So my seminars are not about you promoting myself for you to hire me, but it's all about how you can do it yourself without anybody's help. So if you're in any of the cities that we are visiting, the first one is on the 29th of July in Hyderabad. Please come and give us a look and attend these seminars, and I'm sure they'll be pretty helpful for you. If there have been any questions that I have not been able to look at, because there's a lot of questions going on, and honestly I cannot go through them right now and keep everybody else waiting. So if there are any questions I haven't been able to answer, please feel free to post them on the group. Myself or one of our amazing moderators who have been supporting me, helping me, will come out and take a look at that. A lot of our members who have been very supportive, very helpful, they will probably come and share their experiences with you. Collectively, in the last 10 months from September onwards, we are now 30,000 strong. Yay! A good shout out to, a large shout out, big cheer to my moderators who have done a wonderful job of keeping the community so fostering and so healthy together, and making sure that they try and answer most of the questions that you people pose. We do not have any ulterior motive behind all this. There is no commercial agenda behind all this. A lot of these agents and consultants out there are getting insecure, are getting ruffled up by these videos. Guys, I'm not trying to attack your business. Your market is pretty big. Please go and do it. Don't get worried about me. I'm just very minuscule and very small in this whole process, and my job is only trying to lead you to the credible information which is out there, which you can get your hands onto. So please feel free to post your questions, and we'll be very happy to take a look at them and see if we can answer them. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll do this again next week, same time. Tune in again. Bye.